Don Siegelman is a rare bird, a popular Democrat in the deep red state, Alabama. He's the only person in Alabama history to serve in all 4 statewide offices, including governor. But now he's in prison, and he's serving a 7-year sentence after what many observers in both parties characterize as a political prosecution. 112 former state attorneys general are now calling on President Obama to free him. Joining me in the studio to discuss are Dana Siegelman, daughter of the governor and founder of free-don.org. Mimi Kennedy, actress and author of the HuffPost blog, The Curious Case of Don Siegelman. And in the Google Hangout, we have Parker Griffith, former U.S. Congressman from Alabama in Huntsville, Scott Horton, Columbia law professor and contributing editor to Harper's Magazine in New York, and Grant Woods, the former Republican Attorney General of Arizona and also former co-chair of John McCain for president in Phoenix, Arizona. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Dana, let me start with you. Tell me about your dad. Just simply, was a very popular guy in Alabama, is a very popular guy. From a daughter's perspective, who is he?
My dad is a wonderful person who really cares about people, who takes the time to listen to anyone who needs his ear, and has always been a very accessible person. And I think he's a remarkable human being from a daughter's perspective. He is the same as he is in public at home, which I think is rare. I think one would expect, the niceties to come off and sort of, being more brisk and raw, but he is just a good man. And I'm here because, not because he's a good man, because good men make mistakes. And good men do go to prison because they commit crimes. So I am here because I strongly believe, and I feel the facts strongly tell, that my father is an innocent person who was wrongly prosecuted and wrongly convicted. So there is a difference between both of those. One is, you get in a courtroom, there was something leading the prosecutors to bring you there. Once you're in there, then the prejudice of the courtroom, whether it's from the jury or the judge, takes over and you're wrongly convicted. In Dad's case, he was targeted, prosecuted wrongly, politically, and wrongly convicted. And so I am here begging your audience to get involved, to go to free-don.org, sign the petition I've started to the president. I mean, we need your signature. Educating yourself is great, but we need people to add their voice to this movement, and we need the people in power to know that an injustice has occurred and they can do something about it. They can right this wrong.
And of course, people that are watching the segment right now at home or wherever you might be, throughout the course of the segment, in the resource well below the video, they'll see the link to free-don.org, and you can go to it at any time and check out what Dana's talking about. Tell me a little bit more about what happened and how we got to this point, how this all started, the prosecution that you're talking about. It all revolved around a push to improve public education in Alabama. Is that right?
Right. So Dad was the longest running Democrat in Alabama, if not in the entire Southeast. He was the only governor, or the only person, not just Democrat, but person to have held all of Alabama's highest elected offices. And he was the first governor to endorse Al Gore for president. 1 month before my dad's reelection campaign, he was indicted by the Bush administration. He had been advocating on the platform that he ran on was an education lottery that would have given underprivileged children and all children who made an average B or above the opportunity to go to college for free. And this is something that 43 other states have. Our neighboring states, Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia, Tennessee, they have this sort of Hope Scholarship. That's what it's called in Georgia, and that's the model that my father was hoping to bring to the state of Alabama.
So, Mimi, you blogged for us on the Huffington Post, and you talked about what you called the curious case of Don Siegelman. What was curious about it?
Well, because so much happened to him that the fact that he ended up in jail is completely unjust. But how could something like that happen in the United States of America? That's why it's curious to some. To those of us who have watched the inner workings of what seems to have been a push for a one-party permanent majority in America. It is not that curious. It is the inevitable result of that kind of single-minded political passion that eventually ends up with this kind of injustice. And every minority person probably in the United States knows what I'm talking about, but I don't think very many privileged white people would think that something like this would happen to a governor, to a popular governor. We have his back. It's fine. It has happened, and it did not begin, but it was facilitated by an electronic election result reporting being changed in one county in the United States. Opta scanned paper ballots, and the results were changed. And Don had gone to bed thinking, I won. AP said he's going to be the governor.
And we're talking about the 2002
election.
In Alabama, yeah.
And Don woke up seeing his opponent, Bob Riley, saying, I'm the governor. One county had changed this. Well, let's go count the ballots and see what happened. No, thou shalt not touch those ballots. End of discussion. Then Don was indicted because they thought he's going to come back and want to be governor again in 2006. We gotta do something about this. And there were supposedly conversations that something would be done. That's why it's curious. There's all this evidence saying this was fraudulent and unjust, and yet Don is in prison right now in Louisiana.
And so for you, this goes back to this story begins with these election results, the contested election results.
Well, they were after him before that, but it's the linchpin. Is that, to me, that election?
Let me go to Attorney General Woods. What happened when the governor announced that he was going to be running for election again in 2006? It was going to challenge Governor Riley.
Well, a number of curious things happened. I think it is a curious case. That's to put it lightly, and that's probably why you see so many attorneys general involved. Former attorneys general who, by the way, this is unprecedented. They've never organized around anything in this fashion before. You haven't had, I don't think, 15, 20, much less, over 100 be involved in this case from both parties. What happened, the first thing is they have two different districts in Alabama as far as different U.S. attorneys there. And one district did indict Don Siegelman. It's my belief that I agree with what Mimi said. I think it was so that he wouldn't run again.
And let me just interrupt you, Grant, sorry, and explain specifically what the indictment was about. Is it accurate to say it was over a quid pro quo, a donation to this lottery system, going towards this lottery system?
Yeah, but remember this, don't forget that he was actually indicted twice. He was indicted once, and you have all the hoopla around a former governor being indicted and taken to trial. They took him to trial on the first time, and the prosecutor gave his opening statement, and the judge called everybody into chambers and said, "Is that all you have?" And he said, "Well, yeah, that's what our evidence is going to be," and the judge dismissed the case. I've been doing this for a long time. I've never heard of that. So then another United States attorney gets involved with all sorts of conflicts on the surface, Republican Party conflicts, conflicts with people, being involved with people who were involved in the Governor Riley's campaign. Mm-hmm. And what they alleged was that there was a guy who had been appointed to, who was in the healthcare industry. He had been on a healthcare board or health-related board there in Alabama, appointed to it by the two previous governors, Republican governors, and he had opposed Don Siegelman. As soon as Siegelman won, he supposedly let it be known, "Hey, I'm going to be back. I want to get back on the new governor's good side, even though I didn't support him." They had some meetings, and he agreed that he would give a substantial contribution to this lottery initiative that Governor Siegelman was attempting to get on the ballot. Shortly thereafter, Governor Siegelman reappointed him for the third time to that same board. And that is the quid pro quo for which he was convicted, that he took that donation to the lottery fund, education lottery fund, in exchange for an official act, which was reappointing him to this board that he had been on with the two previous governors.
So I get the sense from all three of you that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you don't believe that in the first place this case should have ever even gone to trial.
That's correct. I think Professor Horton can definitely speak to that as to why just the statute of limitations, et cetera, the RICO charges and such that were brought should have never been brought.
Scott, Professor, can you speak a little bit to that? What are the reasons that we're hearing that there's a belief that they shouldn't have even gone to trial in the first place?
I think there's no question about that. In fact, I think you see what was going on was in the first instance, a juggling between the two different districts that Attorney General Woods just talked about, and it being dismissed in one district. Then you see an effort to mount a new case in another district, and it's based on claims that go back before the statute of limitations, the corruption incidents that are alleged actually involve other prominent Alabama office holders, notably Senator Jeffrey Sessions, far more prominently than Governor Siegelman. But one prosecutor, in fact, remarked to Time Magazine that this was about Siegelman, not anyone else. That Siegelman was not a member of the home team here; he was an adversary. So we see prejudice evinced at the margins at every step, and we see some very odd machinations that went on in the courtroom in Montgomery to get a judge assigned. So I've now established that the judge who tried it was not the judge who it was originally assigned to. Prosecutors went to the first judge to get him to recuse himself because they had decided they wanted another judge, a judge they knew had a grudge against Siegelman. So, in fact, at almost every facet of this case, we see some gross, really unusual irregularity. And I think we also see people at high positions in the Justice Department learning about the problems, but doing nothing to intervene and stop them.
And when we're talking about high-level people in the Justice Department, who are we talking about?
Well, in particular, I mean, it goes all the way to the Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General's office.
And was that Alberto Gonzales at that point?
Well, we have Ashcroft and Gonzales at different times, but we also have David Margolis repeatedly involved, who is the senior career person in the Justice Department, who is, when ethics complaints are brought to his attention, he basically is allowing the case to go forward at every step, and he also intervenes at least 3 times that I've documented to block an internal investigation of the bona fides of the Siegelman case within the Justice Department.
I just want to pause here for a second, just because I looked over at you, Dana, and I can see on your face that it's like dizzying. There are so many details. There's such depth and complexity to this story. What is it like to deal with this?
Well, I feel fortunate because I have this amazing group of people backing me. And I get reached out to all the time now because people think I have a voice and I can do something. And they tell me, my dad was wrongly prosecuted or I was wrongly targeted. And I've been, dealing with this. And I think we have a problem in this country. And I think Dad's case just happens to be like the most blatant example because, as Professor Horton said, it's at every level. It's not just the prosecutorial level or the judge. It's at every single level. And it probably had to do because Dad was a Democrat in a Republican state, and so all the people in those positions around him happened to be Republican, happened to get on board with this prosecution and do the bidding of people like Karl Rove. I mean, that's the blatant truth. But there are other people in this country that have, for the longest time, been wrongly prosecuted. And like Mimi said earlier, I mean, minorities know this so well. It's almost a joke. They stand in line in the courtroom and they look at each other and they're like, how many times have you been here? And that's not funny. The fact that people can be targeted in this country, and the fact that, I'm a Jewish Christian American sitting here going, well, it happened to me too. I guess if it can happen to a governor, it really can happen to anyone. But it has been happening to people and we've got to do something about it.
Yeah.
You mentioned Karl Rove, and Professor Horton, let me ask you about Karl Rove. What was Karl Rove's involvement in this case?
Well, Karl Rove really became the mastermind for a strategy within Alabama of taking control of the state. He focused originally on judicial elections. In fact, most people associate him with Texas, and it's true. He had a big operation there. The second major outpost of the Rove campaign machine was in Alabama. His closest associate was Bill Canary. And Bill Canary was the leading campaign finance advisor in Alabama. And his wife, Laura Canary, was the U.S. attorney who brought the Siegelman prosecution. And there was a direct, in fact, conflict of interest on this point because Bill Canary was advising Siegelman's campaign opponent, as was Karl Rove, while Laura Canary was prosecuting the case against Siegelman. And bit by bit, everything that was going on in the investigation was being leaked to the press. In fact, we know that at times materials were leaked to the press about the prosecution from Bill Canary's office. That has been documented.
We have a clip, actually. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we have a clip from 60 Minutes from 2008 addressing this issue of Karl Rove's involvement in this case. Let's take a look at that.
Now, a Republican lawyer from Alabama, Jill Simpson, has come forward to claim that the Siegelman prosecution was part of a 5-year secret campaign to ruin the governor. Simpson told us she did what's called opposition research for the Republican Party. She says that during a meeting in 2001, Karl Rove, President Bush's senior political advisor, asked her to try to catch Siegelman cheating on his wife.
Karl Rove asked you to take pictures of Siegelman.
Yes.
In a compromising sexual position with one of his aides.
Yes, if I could.
She says she spied on Siegelman for months but saw nothing. Even though she worked as a Republican campaign operative, Simpson says she wanted to talk to us because Siegelman's prison sentence bothers her conscience.
Were you surprised that Rove made this request?
No.
Why not?
I had had other requests for intelligence before.
From Karl Rove?
Yes.
So we asked Karl Rove, we contacted his office, we asked him to either come on the segment, provide a statement for the segment, and, Mr. Rove declined. Professor Horton, we're looking here at the involvement of potentially, according to that 60 Minutes piece, according to what you're telling me today, the top political advisor to the President of the United States in this case. Has there been any fallout, any ramifications, any consequences because of his involvement here?
None whatsoever. In fact, what's happened is the Justice Department has firmly sealed the records and refused to turn them over so that it was difficult to document his involvement. But we also know from the U.S. Attorney scandal and an internal investigation conducted by the Justice Department on that, they clearly documented Karl Rove's his routine engagement with and manipulation of the Justice Department, stretching to issues like the appointment of U.S. attorneys and also lobbying U.S. attorneys to bring and to drop specific prosecutions. This was documented all around the country, in California, New Mexico, Arkansas, for instance. And I think there's really no doubt whatsoever that he was deeply involved in this prosecution in Alabama. And I believe people in the Justice Department understand that. They know that. They view it as a vulnerability. They don't want to see it discovered.
Yeah. There are so many other aspects of this, Mimi. And Congressman Griffith, I'll get to you in a minute because I know that you have been with the governor in prison. You've visited with him recently. But let's talk about Laura Canary, who was the prosecutor here. And what we've heard here is that there was political connections there as well.
Well, absolutely. As I say, the overall thrust was to try to have a one-party state, and the judiciary was very important. I want to keep going back because it still impinges on our future as Americans. How easy it is to erase evidence that's digital, and how easy it is to flip an election, even when you have paper ballots, if you're only relying on the digital count. That's trouble that we're still in, and my interest is to go forward and get out of that trouble. Meanwhile, the machinations that have gone on in the Justice Department, who's covering up for whom, what's gone on in the past, I practically think we need a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to get to the bottom of that. Desmond Tutu said nobody's going to come forward and say what they did if they're just going to land in the slammer or put their friends in the slammer because of it. We had to make a Truth and Reconciliation Commission because the part of that that's different from the Western legal system is the more truth you told to our commission, the better it got for everybody. Because we need to know as a country that we're not going to do this again. Not for minorities, not for governors, not for presidents, not for operatives like Karl Rove. We're just not going to do this unjustly again.
And there's one final piece of the so many that are in this complex case. Attorney General Woods, I want to ask you about the judge, Mark Fuller, and what role he's played in this case.
Well, you know, I've read a lot that's been written about the judge. Professor Horton's really done an amazing job of providing the background on that. I would say it's highly unusual that he was the judge. It's highly unusual, all the different reasons why he might have had conflicts where he shouldn't be the judge. I did I did go down and testify at the resentencing, and so I got to see him live and in person. I thought he was 100% biased. His mind was made up. His judicial demeanor was poor. This is a guy who, again, this is as we've said, this is a person who had held every office in the state, every major statewide office, former governor of the state, and yet he chose to take him into custody and put him in shackles in front of everybody in the courtroom, something you don't do when someone's convicted of serious physical crimes, much less a crime like this. The guy, I don't think should have been on the case, but it's all the more reason for the president to get involved here. President Obama's won a big victory here. It's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And what I'm interested in, and what the attorneys general are interested in, is righting a wrong right here. We're the top law enforcement officers in our state. We believe in the system. And like some of the things that the professor and that Mimi and Dana have been pointing out, we'll continue to fight on, Republican or Democrat. This is an American issue.
Well, that's
about our country here.
Let me interrupt you, Mr. Attorney General, and ask you that because you are a Republican. So many of the signatories of the attorneys general in this letter to the president asking for a commutation of the sentence of the governor are not Democrats. And explain to me why this is a bipartisan effort.
Well, because look, we have to remain, maybe, I don't think it's naive to remain idealistic about our justice system. If we as leaders in this country can't remain committed to a very high ideal, that when you walk through that courtroom, you're supposed to be judged irrespective of your class or your ethnicity or your race or your politics, but you're going to be judged based upon the facts. The cases won't be brought against someone simply because at the end of the day, we can't beat you politically, so we're going to try to ruin you and take you out by misusing the justice system. We can't have that happen in this country. I understand that it goes on, but myself and my colleagues say we have to fight against that. So we have fought against it. We'll continue to fight against it. But first and foremost, right now, we need to right this wrong that a very good man, a leader of his state, a leader in this country, is sitting in a prison cell as we speak right now, and he should not be there. And the president has the ability to take him out of there and send him home. And we're asking the president to do that.
Congressman, you, and I believe you're muted, so if you take your mouse and you click on the upper right-hand corner of your screen, the little button that looks like a microphone, it will be able to hear you. I don't know if you see that button. Let's try that. Can you hear us? We still don't hear you. Look to the top right of the video box, and there's a little On your screen, there's a little box that looks like a microphone, and it should be red. If you click it, it might allow us to hear your audio. Do you happen to see that? If not, we can call you on the phone and we'll get you over the phone, which is not a problem. And that's what we'll do, Congressman. We'll call you on the phone right now. So stand by. We're going to call you on the phone. But let me turn back to you guys. We've talked about so many issues here. We've talked about voting rights and how broken our voting system is in this country. We've talked about potentially a corrupt judge. We've talked about potentially a corrupt prosecutor. But at the end of the day, and what I wanted to ask the congressman about is, your father's in jail, and for at least in part, he's, correct me if I'm wrong, been in solitary confinement. Is that right? It's not true.
No, what Attorney General Woods was referring to is when he was first sentenced in 2007, he was dragged away in handcuffs and leg manacles, put in solitary confinement for a month, dragged around the country for 2 months. I didn't get to speak to my father for 2 months because, frankly, I didn't know where he was and he didn't know how to reach me. But finally, he has been put at Oakdale federal prison camp in Louisiana. He's back there now. So he was resentenced and put back in prison on September 11th, a day when there'd be no national media and no one talking about it.
And a significant day, too.
Well, that was strategic on behalf of the judge. Again, he thought, well, I can't have him dragged away in handcuffs and shackles this time, so I'll just send him back on September 11th and hope that no one notices. And it's like, no, we can't have that. We're going to say something. We're going to stand up and fight.
It was a warden in Louisiana, you told me, after he was taken away in shackles and nobody could find him, which was strategic because the media couldn't find him either, nor could his family. And finally, a warden in Louisiana said, "What's with the solitary confinement on your orders?" And Don said, "I have no idea." And that warden, thank God, said, "Well, I'm not going to do it. You don't look dangerous to me." I mean, it was down to that, the compassion of individuals sensing that some great injustice had been done here. If they can do it, our president can do it.
Well, Congressman, now I believe we have you joining us by the phone. You've been there. You've been with the governor. You've seen his conditions. What can you tell us?
He's doing as well as he can do. He's certainly disappointed to be there. And I want the listeners to know that Don Siegelman is 67 years old. The actuarial tables tell us that he's got another 13 or 14 years to live, and this judge has sentenced him to half of that. Some historical perspective. Karl Rove was born the same year as Lee Atwater. Lee Atwater was a paid goon for the senior Bush. Karl Rove is a paid goon for the junior Bush, and Karl Rove's hands are all over this, with Billy Canary, Laura Canary, etc. I'm an oncologist by training. I came into politics late. But I see the wrongness here, and I see that this is not about America. This is an individual who got caught by people who put a mean-spirited Republican Party above America. And this is absolutely one of the most unjust things I've ever encountered. Watching the Karl Rove Southern strategy, it's a racist strategy. It pits people against one another. It splits us apart. And he was very, very successful in vetting judges. The thing that we didn't hear about Judge Fuller is he's also a defense contractor. His livelihood depended on government contracts. Karl Rove was a very influential, and still is. His sun's setting a little bit now, but he was very influential in the last Bush's administration. Karl Rove could call a senator and say, I think Judge Fuller's defense contract should be approved or should not be approved. Judge Fuller should have never taken this case. He opposed Don Siegelman politically in Alabama. He opposed him through candidacies. He was an executive on the Republican committee in Alabama. He fought Don Siegelman tooth and nail, and for him to take this case is absolutely a demonstration of unethical behavior. And I don't know about judges, but I do know physicians protect their own, and I assume that's what's going on here, because there was enough judicial misconduct in this case for the average guy on the street to see. Now, Don, let me tell you how mean-spirited this has gotten. Don Siegelman could be in prison an hour from his home. He is 8 to 9 hours drive away from his home in Oakdale, Louisiana, the middle of nowhere. It is absolutely incredible that this gentleman, this man, and I've known him longer than Dana has. I've known Don before Dana was born. And I've seen him work, and I have seen him sacrifice over and over again for the state of Alabama. Now, we can disagree about a Democrat and we can disagree about a Republican, but we can't disagree, as the Attorney General said, we cannot disagree about our ideals of justice in America.
Let me ask.
This has occurred, and it is a shame that it's been allowed to continue.
Let me ask you all a question, and Dana, perhaps you're the best person to answer this. I read the letter that was written by the Attorneys General, and maybe Attorney General Woods can also weigh in here. And it doesn't make any mention of the charges. It's basically a compassionate request for a commutation of the sentence.
That's because 54 attorney generals already went to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. 54 went to the Attorney General Mukasey when he took over for Gonzales. It grew to 75. Oh, I think it was 75 that went to Mukasey. Then it grew to 91. They went to Congress, demanding that the Congress investigate this independently. Then it grew to over 100, and 100 went to the Supreme Court and said in an amicus brief to the Supreme Court, you've got to hear this case. This threatens our Constitution. It threatens our democracy. And now it's 112 going to the president and saying, please, sir, out of the kindness of your heart, would you just do what's right and get this guy out of prison? Because they've already outlined exactly what's wrong with this case in so many times, in so many words, and so many letters to so many people. Right. It almost seems utterly ridiculous that we're here today begging the president, please just do what's right. Don't make this political. Can't your PR team use George Will came out in support of Don Siegelman, a Democrat, and basically appealed to the Supreme Court to hear this case. Can't the president just quote George Will and say, guys, the top constitutional law scholars in this country, other leading law scholars, and 112 attorneys general want this guy out, and so do thousands of people like Mimi and myself. We're signing a petition. Petitions are important. That's why I'm, beseeching your audience, please just sign your name to this petition because it is powerful. Your voice matters, your number matters, and all of us combined, we can make a difference and we can write this.
I can see, I'm just looking at you, listening to you, that this weighs on you. Do you get a chance to talk to your dad?
I do. It's brief. He can call every few days, and we get cut off after a few minutes because there are, I think, 130 guys that want to get calls out, write letters, and all of that stuff is read. There have independent, they have investigative people there that are, 8 to 5 type of guys that sit and listen on the phone, read the letters that come in and out. So, everything is processed, but yes, we do get to talk. And
I've said it's Dickensian. It's, holiday time, and here is a daughter pleading for her father to be freed from his unjust incarceration. So it would really be nice if it happened now, this presidential pardon, and he could come home for the holidays. I just want to say, too, my own father was a Republican lawyer in upstate New York, and what happened to me? But I'm honored to be in the company of the others on this, the journalism they've done and the attorneys general and the friends of Don from Alabama, because that's the kind of integrity that I remember. And I think our country could really move forward when we work together.
I just want to say, if you all take a look at your screens, on the screen right now is the petition at change.org. There's a nice photo of you and your dad. There's over 40,000 signatories to it right now. If you go into the resource well, as I said earlier, directly below this video, we can link you directly to this petition if you'd like to sign up on it. Again, I want to thank all of you for being here. Professor Horton, Attorney General Woods, Representative Griffith, and Dana and Mimi. Thank you both so much for being here and telling your story.
Thank you for
Thank you,
having us.
everyone.